Welcome back to Talkback. Brand new sponsor of Talkback this morning, Western States Cat, offering free local delivery from their stock of over 15,000 truck and equipment parts. Stop in and take advantage of discounts up to 35% on items including filters, fluids, batteries, and Caterpillar branded toys. Western States Cat, built for Montana. Also brought to you by Silway Armory on Stockyard Road, with more guns and ammo than anyone in Missoula. The best prices in Montana, Montana's premier firearms dealer. And by the Bitterroot Tour of Homes, August 19th to the 21st. And for ticket information, check them out online at bitterrootbia.com. All righty then. The best dressed man in the room is right to my left. That's Mark Thane.
I'm to Peter's right, or right across.
Yeah, the superintendent of School District 1. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
How was your reunion last month?
It was very good. We had 58 members of my family in attendance, and it was just nice to get away for 3 days and
That's cool.
Reconnect with everyone.
Nice. Well, that's a lot of fun. What a cool tradition.
That's a lot of Thanes.
Yeah, I'm 8th out of 9 children, so you get all of us and then the next generation together, and it's but it is wonderful.
Well, you're back in gear now, right? Getting ready for school.
We are.
So what's that? What does that entail? Is it like crunch time? You've just been waiting for all this work for the whole summer?
So what I want to know is what's back to school shopping like for the superintendent?
Yeah, really. Well, I'm back to wearing ties. There is an awful lot that needs to occur in these couple weeks right before school. We continue to have enrollment shifts and start looking at our staffing patterns across the district. Many, particularly elementary schools, shut down for the summer months across the state. So you come back and all of a sudden you have all these requests for records for kids that have moved, and we are very much a mobile society. And of course we have literally hundreds of people that want to register new students for school. So we do our best in the spring to get everybody staffed, but now we're at crunch time, and there's a little level of concern among building principals as to what their enrollments are and whether or not they can meet accreditation standards, and making sure we get our staff deployed in the right places.
Now, you were when we were leaving to go into summer break, there was all this construction underway, and we had high hopes that things would be completed at a certain time, I imagine. Are we going to be able to have everything open, or are we going to have like kids walking around concrete blocks and stuff?
I do lose a little sleep right now, actually, quite honestly. We have actually substantially completed a number of projects. We, of course, in the bond issue, contemplated safety and security as an important element, enhancing technology, dealing with some of the significant deferred maintenance, and then also aligning our classroom spaces with our 21st century model of education. So some of the projects we took on this year, Paxton Elementary had some technology upgrades, redid the entrance for safety and security purposes, and have undertaken construction of some additional classroom space.
Now, can I stop you right there?
Sure.
Just a second? Because I've been through many of the hearings that you talk about safety and security, and basically the reason that is because these schools were designed primarily in the 50s, 60s, maybe the 70s, and it was a deal where the office is over there, the classrooms are over here, and no one ever dreamed that someone would want to do something nefarious at a school. And so now that there has to be redesigned and things like that, just to make sure that everybody's safe.
That's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, in the post-Sandy Hook, post-Columbine era, it's something we do need to focus on. And we had a number of facilities, Lowell's one I like to single out, where the front doors were completely unsupervised. It was a split entry building. Somebody had to go in up a set of stairs, turn left, and go probably about 50 feet down a hallway before you ever got to an office or an adult. And we need to monitor who comes in and out of our buildings. And so all the buildings, as part of our Smart Schools 2020, will have reconfigured entrances and office spaces so that there is direct supervision. We do, as a practice, lock down all the doors that it's reasonable to lock down and funnel our traffic through a single entrance. And so we will monitor everybody that comes into the buildings. And that's particularly a concern at the elementary level, where students are perceived to be more vulnerable. So, for example, at Paxton, we moved back the doors that comprise the entry vestibule. So we've got a larger gathering area for parents and community as they come into the building. But they have to actually make contact with the secretary to gain access to the remainder of the building. And, it's unfortunate that we have to do that. We don't want to discourage public from being engaged in the schools, but unfortunately, that's a necessary evil.
And you don't want the school to be like an armed fortress or
Absolutely
anything. It's
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Chief Charler's our newest building, although it's 21 years old. And we did reconfigure the office and the entry vestibule there. Put in some glass so it doesn't inhibit the open feel to the building, but certainly, again,
Honestly,
constrains the traffic flow.
if my parents were going to send me to Armed Fortress at 8 years old rather than school, I probably would have chosen Armed Fortress.
Yeah, there you go. So back to your question, John. Most of our facilities are ready to go. One of the biggest concerns was whether Jefferson would be fully ready for the Rattlesnake or for the Franklin students, and it is. We'll have even the modulars ready to go on Monday. Rattlesnake School continues to be one of our greatest challenges, partially because the entire building needed to be fire sprinkled as part of the safety and security and in order to meet code. So every single space in the building had to be touched this summer as they ran the piping for that fire suppression system. We also are converting from a steam heat system to a hot water heat system. So again, every classroom space had to be touched. So significant deconstruction in addition to construction. Both at Paxton and at Rattlesnake, the large additions aren't contemplated to be finished until January, but we still need to conduct school. So those classroom spaces that previously existed have to be readied for us. So we're cleaning up sheetrock dust and moving things back into place, and we'll be ready to roll the end of next week.
So my 8-year-old and 5-year-old, I read them that story about them finding the body on one of our schools here in Missoula, getting them ready for Halloween in October coming up.
Right.
And so they want to know if there's any other graveyards or if there's been any ghosts seen at Missoula schools.
No, I'm not aware of any. Unfortunately, we know that the site where Rattlesnake School sits is on a former burial ground. It was the county poor farm from 1880 to 1920, and they estimate as many as 1,000 people were buried on that site in unmarked graves. So previously in the 1980s, when they did additions to the school, they discovered some skeletons. And when this latest excavation, which was related directly to the fire suppression system, they needed to hook to the water main. When they began excavating actually in the street, so not on the school property, is where they uncovered the skeleton. We need to be sensitive culturally, so we brought down an anthropologist to make sure it wasn't, first of all, a Native American burial site.
Right.
Then we're working with the city to get the remains reinterred at the city cemetery, et cetera. And when they did contemplate then finishing the excavation, they did have an anthropologist on site in case something developed as they moved forward.
Okay.
But that's the only significant excavation on that site, and we hope we're done with that. But no, I'm not aware of any other situations where we might have burial grounds or.
Every now and then I like to go back and haunt my old high school, but that's a
Right.
different story.
That's
Anyway,
exactly right.
we're coming up against the break. If you have a question for Superintendent Mark Thane, all 4 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 lines are open, 721-1290. School starting here in the next couple of weeks. If you have some questions about that, what should I do? Where should I go? Who do I call? What do I need to bring, aside from your child? So we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. And we are back on Talk Back, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. Okay.
So I understand that there is a new Cold Springs coming, right? We have land purchased or on the way?
We're in process. So last November, when the bond issue was successful, it included money for the acquisition of property and the construction of a new Cold Springs school. The current Cold Springs is located on Berg Street, yet most of the students who are in attendance live in Linda Vista Maloney Ranch. We bus them a significant distance. So we had established 10 different criteria that we would examine as we tried to identify a site for the new Cold Spring School. Proximity to where the students lived, bikeability, walkability, good flat site, a site large enough to contain buses, parking, playfields, and a school, et cetera. So we've evaluated sites, and last August, actually, we had a neighborhood charrette and invited the community in, and they participated in the process and identified a specific area and actually a site that they thought we should pursue, which we did. Unfortunately, it took us a year to get there, but ultimately it's that site that we've identified, and we did about 10 days ago sign an option to purchase the site with the owner. And the reason it's an option at this point in time is Montana statute requires actually that the electorate approve the selection of a site for a school. So on the November 8th ballot, there will be a question whether or not the electorate would support us locating the new Cold Spring School on that property. And the description of the property is a legal description, but basically it's located at the intersection of Lower Miller Creek Road and Big Fork Drive.
I got to ask you, this has got to get your
Yeah.
goat. This has got to get your goat. You have to go up to the public for getting land for a school, for any kind of bond money that you might want. And when the city council wants to purchase the water system, they don't even have to float the bond in front of the public. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, really. Well, actually, in terms of checks and balances, I quite honestly don't mind. In a situation here like the ballot question regarding Cold Springs, I want to know that we have a consensus and that people support locating Cold Springs School where we intend to locate it. What's difficult for us is we already have the money, so the ballot question will be posed. There's no additional fiscal impact. There's no change to people's taxes. Yet I perceive that unless we're very effective in terms of our messaging, people might get to that ballot question and say, what? The school district's coming back again? And so we need to really take advantage of the next 81 days until the election to make sure we do get that message out. It's permission to select the site.
Is it possible to put that right there in the ballot language? This requires no revenue.
And actually, we have been working with bond counsel to make sure that we craft appropriate language, and the school board will actually take action on that language tonight at a special board meeting.
So is there a timeline? Let's say the voters approve it. So what's the timeline?
So the election is November 8th. If, in fact, the voters affirm that decision, then we have, I believe it's 10 days in the contract to exercise our option to complete a buy-sell agreement. We would do that, but even prior to the election, we'll do certainly our due diligence. We have a request for qualifications for engineer and architectural services that'll go forth so that we can appropriately test the site, make sure that we don't have any hidden concerns with regard to brownfields,
burial
etc.
grounds, or
something like that. We actually also need to conduct an appraisal because although we negotiated with the owner and made an offer for the property, the way the option is drafted, it is the price that we bargained or the appraisal amount, whichever is lesser. So we will hopefully in the next couple weeks identify an appraiser and get that process going. So
very cool.
It's an 8-acre site. If everything goes according to plan, right after November, we would have architects begin the process of designing the school. We would hope that we would go to bid in the early spring, and construction would take approximately 15 months, and we would open in the fall of 2018.
Oh, cool. All right.
Now, one of the big topics, and by the way, I shared this story with our listeners the other day, and here I'll just read some of the responses people gave when I told them that the Smarter Balance test results had come back, and what the results were, that we were, 50% proficient when it comes to math and 57% proficient when it came to reading in Missoula.
Now, is that top to bottom, or is that specific, like 4th and 8th grade, or what?
It's grades 3 through 8.
3 through 8. Okay.
The responses that we got were people are a little concerned about this. For example, one said that would be an F grade, I believe. Another one said half is good enough? ? Another one said this is terrible. Yet another said this scares me. I wanted to get your response because obviously this is how a lot of people are responding when they hear this.
Sure.
About what's going on here.
Well, there are a number of things that are going on here. First of all, it's not a percentage in terms of students getting an average grade, so you can't rank it as an A through F. What they do is when they establish the test, and you can go back and have some conversation about test construction, first of all. You identify the content standards, and you develop some questions that refer to those content standards, and then those are administered universally across the state. A group of people actually came together at some point and said, okay, we need to establish cut scores. And that basically says, given X number of correct questions, we'll rate kids as being proficient. Given X number of correct questions, we'll rate them as being advanced. Or, conversely, given X number correct, we'll say they're nearing proficiency, but they haven't demonstrated total consistency with the learning. Or they're not proficient at all. They're novice. So it's not that our kids averaged 50% on some test. That's the first thing. Second thing is anytime you administer a new assessment, whether it's a local, state, national assessment, you do see a drop in the scores, and we had fully anticipated that as a state and certainly as a school district. So just to put a little context around them, as you said, Missoula County Public Schools, grades 3 through 8, math proficiency was at 50% of our students proficient or advanced. If you look statewide, that number was 41%. So we were 9% of our students, 9% of our students proficient or advanced than the state average. In reading, Missoula County Public Schools, again, was, let's see,
57%.
I'm looking at the wrong graph, 57% proficient or advanced. The state average was 50% proficient or advanced.
We have to go to a break. But right before we do, I just want to make sure I understand. When we talk about the percentage, we're saying that 50% of the students were ranked as either not proficient or what's the fourth?
Nearing proficient.
Or nearing proficient. So 1 out of 2 is not considered proficient at math or proficient at reading.
Correct.
I'll just pose this, and then we'll get back to it after the break. With the new Common Core standards, the way we were taught when we went to our Cold Springs Introduction Day was that proficiency means you have a basic grasp of the material and can use it. Advanced means like you have the basic grasp of the material. You go beyond those measures, and you could probably teach it to a fellow student. So to not have the basic grasp of reading for nearly half of the students, or of basic math for nearly half of the students, would alarm most parents, I think.
Certainly, and it should.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to come right back. And I want to know if anybody up there got 100% out there, anybody in the state. So 721-1290 is our number. All 4 lines are open. Do you have questions for Mark Thane? Give us a call. Oh, taking you way back. 721-1290 is the number. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian. Mark Thane, Superintendent of School District 1. Now, you asked a question. We're going to get to Emmett here in just a minute. But you asked a very important question before the break about 50% versus 57%. What?
Right, yeah, and as a parent, I get worried when I see stuff like that. Because we're all told that if your kid isn't hitting proficiency, they really haven't learned the basic materials that the class was teaching. So when I see the results coming out at just 50% proficient in math, I'm worried. And I was hoping maybe you could console me or tell me where we're going from here.
No, there are a number of things. First of all, I would say this. You look at our statewide results and you see 41% of our students listed as proficient in math and 50% in English language arts. And you compare that with, there's only one true national assessment, and that's the National Assessment of Education Progress, which is congressionally mandated and is administered in all 50 states plus U.S. territories, et cetera. And in the latest data from NAEP, Montana ranked in the top 5 in reading achievement and in the top 10 in math achievement. So you go back and you look at these scores and you say, wow, we have a lot of kids that are not yet proficiency. Yet when you compare to other states, you know that a lot of other states are going to find themselves in the same position.
I know you're not going to get political, but I'll just express this because I know a lot of my listeners.
I've never known this show to get political.
A lot of my listeners are.
Not
but
ever.
People tell me, and I hear this from both Hillary supporters and Trump supporters. Yeah, my candidate's not that great, but look how bad the other candidate is. Right?
Yeah, right.
And I kind of feel like, yeah. Missoula, we're only 50% proficient, but Montana's even worse, and the rest of this country's even worse than that.
It's the Lake Wobegon effect.
Right. It doesn't really give you that much encouragement, I guess.
No, and I think your point's well taken. As I expressed to you on the phone when we talked about the data when it was first released, we do take this seriously, and we need to disaggregate the data. We need to ask the appropriate questions and find out what the data really means. And I'm not using this as an excuse, but we need to be more savvy with regard to the test in a couple of areas. First of all, this is a test that's administered solely on a computer. So you ask yourself the questions about students' capability with regard to keyboarding as a third grader, et cetera. So the first question is, does technology create a hurdle for some students? So we need to make sure that part of what we do is make sure our students have experiences and opportunity to use technology so that they can more fully access the test and respond appropriately. So that might be one hurdle. A second hurdle is many of these questions are posed in formats that are very different than you as a classroom teacher might pose questions on your daily assessments, on your unit tests, et cetera. So are students familiar with format? I've never been a fan of teaching to the test. I think we should have assessments that fairly gauge what students know and are able to do. I would also say that this test is dynamic. So if Peter gets a question and it's related to a specific math concept and he doesn't get it right, the computer will identify a less difficult question with the same concepts involved, and it'll probe for a little bit to see if he really knows the concept or not. So all students are not taking the exact same test. It's dynamic. And the people that are engaged in test construction still validate the test. They're still reliable. But it's very different than what we may have experienced. So, it's not your standard SRA test that we took as a kid.
And vice versa.
That being said, we need to go back then and do an item analysis and say, okay, where did our kids perform well? Where did they not perform well? That will identify for us areas of our curriculum that we need to strengthen. And that's the value of the test.
Peter had asked a question about, is there someone that got 100% proficiency? And the way that this test is modeled is kind of like your daughter's nursing test, in that if you answer questions correctly, you're going to get more difficult questions.
You bet.
I mean, these kids might be asking...
And you'll have fewer questions, too. So
you might be answering junior high and high school level questions at a certain point, and you might only be in 6th grade. So it would be really hard to get 100% in the score, but you'd still probably come out as above proficient or advanced, right?
Sure. So ideally, what we hope to get to a point of being able to do is identify for an individual student where he or she has relative strengths and where he or she has relative weaknesses, so that we can use the results to inform instruction for that individual student. In theory, a student should not ever get 100%, because if that's the case, we haven't given them difficult enough tests. We need to know what we need to do to push them to the next level of learning. So if your fundamental question is, am I satisfied with the scores? Absolutely not. We have work to do. We need to analyze the scores. We need to determine what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and that will inform our curriculum development and our instructional practices.
Actually, my fundamental question is my kid. What did my kid do on that test? I really want to know. Are the parents going to be able to see the test results of their own children?
You will. We haven't made a determination yet whether those will be distributed at parent-teacher conferences where you have an opportunity to dialogue about it, or whether we send those home with a note that says, gee, if you have questions or concerns, contact us.
Well, and also will be indicative, too, on what comes with the response, either a crying towel or a star. So
right.
I don't think they've come up with that yet. Anyway, Emmett, if you'll hang on a second, we're up against a break. I want to give you plenty of time to make your point. We also have 3 lines open. 721-1290 is our number. Somebody already asked me here in the studio if you guys are preparing for the refugee families that are coming in, and we'll talk about that too. So
you bet.
We'll be right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. The Carol King Jones going on here this morning. 721-1290 is the number, and let's get Emmett on the line. Been waiting very patiently. Emmett, you're on with Mark Thane. Go ahead.
Good morning, Emmett.
Thanks for taking my call. Well, it's fascinating about the tests and about how the tests are obviously different than the SRAs we took in the 1970s and 80s. Maybe that's one solution. Instead of putting it on a computer and having a modernized test where it gets more difficult, I think we should just go back to the same SRI or whatever it is from the 1970s and the early 1980s that we have, and that would solve a lot of problems right there. But I also wanted to mention, and I've talked about this before, there's just too much social engineering in the schools and not enough on reading, writing, and arithmetic. I think we need to go back to the 3 R's rather than Ritalin and social engineering and finding out who has Asperger's, who's different, and rules, you can't hug your close friends.
Considering, Emmett, that only one of those is actually an R.
Yeah, true.
Well, that is the joke.
3 R's.
You got to give them a pass for that
and,
one.
arithmetic, not Ritalin. So that way they would, and phonics. We should teach phonics again and just go back to the old 1950s way of teaching things where kids would be proficient in the basics and instead of all the computer stuff. I can't understand computers, and I would rather take a test on a piece of paper and some pen or a pencil,
Now, Emmett, just so you know, the 2 tests that the kids are taking right now are focused specifically, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, on math and reading.
Right.
That's correct. And, I would say a couple things, Emmett. First of all, I do hear what you're saying. the old day when we took SRAs and Iowa Test of Basic Skills, it was really a dipsticking so that we could compare our kids to everybody else across the country. But quite honestly, it didn't tell us what our kids did and did not know. And the advantage of a computerized dynamic test is it will identify those content areas and will probe with additional questions. So we do identify what they do and don't know. So hopefully that can be utilized effectively to inform our instructional practice. And I think the second point I would make, although paper and pencil may be more easily administered and more easily understood by the parents, the reality is the workplace of, the 2016 is one that's largely dominated by computers and technology. And I see John and Peter here with their multiple screens here. I think that's a reality our kids will face when they transition to the workplace.
I have no idea what they mean, but that's
there you go. So,
in the minority report room here, we are the minority.
Yeah. So we need to provide real-world experiences and authentic experiences, too, that can ultimately transition into the workforce. So,
Emmett, thanks for the call, man.
Certainly.
Appreciate it. Okay, now, real quickly, we've seen that we're going to have some Congolese refugee families coming in. I'm not sure how many, whether 2 or 3. I don't really know how many yet. It could just be one. I don't know. So when that happens, obviously they're going to have kids, and when they go to school. So how will you handle all that?
Well, at this point in time, we're aware of one family. They are Congolese. There are 4 children in the family, and we, first of all, are waiting to determine or to understand where they will live so we can register them in a neighborhood school. It will largely be a total immersion program in an American classroom. We will certainly work with the staff and the school that's impacted to help understand the cultural nuances so that we're sensitive to that. We will provide support services through the ESL program to help them derive some benefit certainly from an American classroom. But the reality is, if the primary language is Swahili, we may not have access to a large number of interpreters that speak Swahili. So it will provide a challenge for us. But I think it'll also provide some opportunities for us. Students will learn about other cultures, and a little bit of cultural diversity in Missoula, I think, could be a healthy thing. I think also these families largely have been in refugee camps for a long period of time. And one of the questions on my mind is, what types of educational services did they receive? And do they have some basic competence in English?
And is there a way to test them to find out where to place them?
We will actually, all of our students that are immigrants or refugees, we do tests of language development, et cetera, as part of a state requirement.
Because you don't want
we will do that.
To put into a place where they're not comfortable or they...
No. And for the long term, one of the things that we contemplate is that through the IRC, they will have access to grants and support us in writing grants. And as families come into the community, we hope that we can do a lot of readiness work. So if there are preschoolers in the home, for example, we would like to get those kids connected early on in an environment that helps establish kindergarten readiness. Or if families transition during the course of a school year, we would like to have a significant summer program so that they can, again, develop an understanding of the expectations that we'll have in school and give them some rudimentary skills to help set them up for success.
Have those that are helping the refugees come over, have they been very communicative with you about how many to expect? And
they have been. They, again, are just getting started, too, and they have capacity issues that they need to address with regard to housing, medical services, et cetera. So we anticipate early on it will be slow in terms of the numbers. They have talked about as many as 100 refugees in a year. We're talking at this point a single family of 6, which includes 4 children, I believe 3 of whom will be school age. So again, questions about whether or not we would want to provide services at a limited number of sites or whether we want to utilize full neighborhood schools will be dependent on what resources we can identify and how well we can spread those.
I think it's interesting where there seems to be in some ways such a real backlash as to we don't want these folks because this is just my own personal experience. In my own personal experience, you might have those mindsets to start, but once you actually meet people and you see the kids and you talk to mom and dad and you find out with their experiences and their story and all that, a lot of that stuff just kind of melts away.
It absolutely does. And, this isn't the first time Missoula's had this experience. I think we as a community have benefited greatly by our involvement with the Hmong community. We had a number of local churches and religious organizations that sponsored a large number of Russian immigrants to the community in the late 80s, early 90s. And again, my experience in the schools was very positive with those families. I think our experience as a community has been very positive.
My family had one of those Russian families live with us after the fall of the Iron Curtain, and it was we still cherish that relationship, bring each other Christmas presents around Christmas time. They've named their children after my family. I mean, when you see, Ruth out there, that's my mom, or it's this little Russian girl who's now like a teenager and a mom herself, or an adult and a mom herself. But, there's definitely connections that cross those cultural boundaries.
You bet. And so I would just say, I know we are up against a break, but while we talk a lot about the refugees, we actually have had children of more international students, many of whom are tied to the university register this year than the 3 from the Congolese refugee camp. And they present many of the same challenges. If they come in speaking Chinese with limited English proficiency, we're going to have supports in place for them also. And so this isn't totally new work to us. The volume might just change.
Yeah, I think a lot of the publicity has been heightened more than anything else. So,
I would agree.
Yeah, and we're going to come right back. 721-1290 is our number. We have 3 lines open. John's on line 1, and we'll be right back. This is Talk Back, and it's Thursday. Mark Thane joining us here in studio. He's the superintendent of School District 1, and I think of all the times that you've been with us, this is the fewest amount of calls we've had.
I think people are still in summer mode, but there's a lot happening still, and you let off asking about preparing for school, and I would take advantage of that opening maybe to say that tonight we're actually adopting our district budgets for fiscal year 2017. And last November, the voters very generously approved our bond issues. And so I do want to take just a minute and talk about our budgets.
Go ahead.
The elementary budget actually is somewhat of a misnomer. There are 9 budgeted funds. And, of course, the taxpayers are most interested in their tax impact. Our biggest fund is our general fund budget, and that's the one that pays salary and benefits and heat and light and those kinds of things. And we're a service-related industry, so it probably is no surprise to people that 92% of our elementary general fund budget goes to salary and benefits, which doesn't leave a lot to pay the heat bills, the light, buy curriculum materials, et cetera.
Books.
Yes, books. But on people's minds is what exactly is happening with that budget. And John referenced earlier that, you this time of year start hearing about city and county and school district budgets. Our general fund budget on the elementary side is actually increasing, but it's increasing largely based on student enrollment. And so a lot of the increase in revenue comes from the state level, which I still recognize is obviously taxpayer money. But in terms of the impact on local taxpayers, we actually on a $200,000 home will see a decrease of $9.66 based on the number of mills we'll levy locally. We chose on the heels of our bond issue not to run general operating levy this year. We felt like we had enough capacity in the budget to get through. Our transportation budget, because of an increased taxable value, et cetera, in the community, will go down by $1.66 on a $200,000 home. We could go right on down the list. Probably the most significant reduction, we had a building reserve that expired. The voters had approved it 5 years ago. We're done collecting that revenue. So that's a $12.50 reduction to individual tax bills. Of course, so if we look at 8 of the 9 budgeted funds, we see a reduction actually of about $13.46 on a $200,000 home. We're well aware, however, that the bond issue that was passed has a significant impact on those taxpayers, and that's to the tune of about a $90.86 increase on a $200,000 home annually. So the net effect of all of our 9 budgets, which includes the debt service for the bond issue, is that person with a property that has an assessed value of $200,000 would see an annual increase of $77.43, about $6.45 a month.
Yeah, about that. Yeah. So.
Okay, I have a conspiracy theory I want to run by you.
We have 2 minutes, John.
All right, here it goes. Okay. Last year we had the Smarter Balance test in Missoula County, at least, right?
Yes.
And there were some issues. The state didn't want to show everybody what the numbers were. And as a casual observer here, I thought to myself, we did really bad on this test, and they don't want to tell us that we did bad, and they're hiding it. And now we have this new test, and I was just wondering if you compare these results to the last results. Did we outperform last results?
We did.
Okay.
Both in math and reading, our proficiency rate increased by about 4%. It's not tremendously significant, quite honestly, in my book, and I think we have a lot of work to do. We had some schools, and again, we're just starting to disaggregate the data, but some schools that performed extremely well, some that didn't perform as well. And we also note that a lot of our schools that are impacted by high mobility rates or high poverty rates didn't score as highly as some of those that have a more stable enrollment population. So we need to ask ourselves the questions about why those factors occur and what we can do to mitigate them, and certainly make sure that we maximize opportunity for all students.
Now that we have a test that can judge competency and how much children know, instead of teaching to age groups, is there a future where we start teaching to competency?
I absolutely believe that's true. And I think you'll see that most likely occurring at the high school level first. We should be able to identify what those college readiness skills are, what those workforce readiness skills are, and make sure that we teach to that competency. Again, it's a very different educational system than when I was a student or even when I was first a teacher. The demands and the expectations are very different. You as a parent, John, I know recognize that it's still critically important that your children come away as strong readers and with mathematical reasoning ability so that they can be successful in potential careers. And there's a lot of talk about STEM education, and engineering and mathematics and science are huge right now in terms of career fields. And we need to be flexible and nimble enough to prepare our students for success in those
Real
areas.
quickly, how many kids are we anticipating in School District 1 this coming year?
Actually, as of yesterday, we had about 8,950 on the rolls. We know that there will be some last-minute registrations as well as some last-minute requests for records.
So right around 9,000.
So, yeah, right around 9,000. We anticipate that being an increase of about 150 students K through 12.
Cool. Okay, we're up against a break, and Catherine is on the line. We'll get to her in just 1 minute. All right, this is Talk Back, and we just have a few minutes left, only about 6 or so, with Mark Thane, Superintendent of School District 1. 3 lines still open if you want to get a quick question in. Catherine, hi, go ahead.
Just basically a quick question, and you may have already said something about it, but I'm curious what the total cost is per student per year, adding together elementary, middle, and high school. How much does it cost to educate one child?
And actually, I didn't report that number. And again, talking off the top of my head, I'll give you a ballpark figure, but I can't tell you for certain if this includes all budgets like the transportation fund, et cetera. But we're looking at approximately $6,500 per student, roughly. And that's simply taking our budget and doing some simple math.
Okay, well, that's better than some other other school systems. That includes also NEA and pension costs in there also?
In one sense. So let me just give you a quick explanation. Those pensions are part of a separate statewide pension system. So over the course of an educator's career, he or she makes contributions that are payroll deductions into that, and the district makes contributions on their behalf. So it is important, obviously, that those systems be viable and healthy, but they're not part of our budget. Once a person retires, they access that from the state retirement system.
Catherine, I got to get one more call in. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for the call. Jim, you're on Talkback with Mark Thane. Hi.
Hi, Mark. I just have a question. I run a small business, and it demands that the employees be able to have good written and verbal communication. But the disturbing trend that I'm seeing is that many of the people these younger, I'd say 30-ish and younger, they're not being taught cursive writing. Is there a reason for that?
That's an interesting debate that rages right now in education circles. I think there certainly is a need for people to be able to read certainly, and to write cursively at some level. But as we continue to transition more and more to technology, most is typical manuscript and printing. So there has been a movement away from it. We still do teach cursive writing in our schools.
Up to what point?
Typically through about 3rd and 4th grade.
Okay.
Again, we could debate whether or not there are merits to that as we do transition to more and more work on a computer or on a screen. I think it's an important skill right now. I would hate it if John and Peter were over there writing their notes in cursive and I couldn't decipher it.
You wouldn't be able to read my handwriting anyway.
Okay.
I can't.
Seriously, it's
Anything else, Jim?
No, it was just that I put a letter from a client, a thank you, in front of an employee, and they couldn't read the thank you because it was written in cursive.
Wow, interesting.
I'm a little surprised to hear somebody in their 20s or 30s couldn't. If it were a younger child, I might expect that.
Someone
could be
that
the
in their
case.
20s and 30s was learning cursive. Yeah, they may not have been paying attention.
Yeah.
It's also possible that you met someone that was dyslexic or had some other issue with reading.
Well, they were raised in a small town in Montana.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Jim. Appreciate that. All right. We have exactly 3 minutes left here, Mr. Thane. So we're going to open it up to you since our callers are not responding. What do you want to talk about that we haven't discussed yet?
We talked a bit about the bond projects. And again, I appreciate the patience of the community as we work through these. As students and parents arrive at schools, they're going to find some revised drop-off and parking, et cetera, at a few schools as we work to enhance safety. There will be some inconveniences they'll work around. We, again, are doing roofing projects at Meadow Hill, Washington, Hellgate, Lewis and Clark. We hope to have those substantially completed by next week, but there may be some minor inconveniences. We take advantage of the weather. We do, again, have ongoing construction, particularly at Paxton and Rattlesnake as we go through the school year. And safety and security of the students around that construction site is critical. So we'd hope parents would talk with their students about that. And I also would want to assure the community that despite the fact that we're going to have a lot of contractors busy on the sites, we are actually background checking all those that will be on the sites and conducting work. It's important to us that we do have a safe and healthy environment for the students. And so it's important that we understand who it is that we have on our sites and that all of them have been appropriately vetted. So we're working on that. We are getting ready for our next round of professional services to be initiated, architects and engineers, as we plan for projects that will take place next year. One of the most significant, and again tonight at the board meeting, we'll act on identifying a general contractor construction manager for Hellgate High School's project. And that will be a multi-year project.
What's going to happen at Hellgate?
Everything from heat delivery systems to a reconstructed library to some renovation of a few classroom spaces, but it's significant. It's an old building, and it's about a $27 million project. We need to do it in a scheduled manner so it's not totally disruptive to people. But we'll go out for a request for qualifications for the contractor now, and then starting next spring, we'll start seeing some construction.
Okay, big last question.
1 minute.
When we see the Smarter Balance test results, will we be able to look at them by school and know which schools are outperforming other schools and maybe even which grades are outperforming other grades?
Actually, you will. And right now, as of yesterday, the Office of Public Instruction has posted all that data on a statewide website. So you can go in and look at any individual school, any individual school district. They have statewide data on grade levels. We don't at this point have that disaggregated data grade levels within each building.
So how do we contact Mr. Mark Thane, Superintendent of Public Instruction? Superintendent of School District.
There we go.
I gave you a big raise.
Just got
there.
my change, yeah. You certainly can call me at the school district office, access our website, and email me directly. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and have an opportunity to dialogue.
Thanks so much.